Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latin and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi, welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler Vale. Bienvenidos.
So today, so Carlos and I talk all the time. And one of the things we were talking about is, what did you call it?
The multi-hyphenate Latino.
Yeah. And what does that mean?
That is, well, actually, I think you're the perfect person to help explain to us what the multi-hyphenate Latino is. So give it a go.
Okay. So that is a person that wears many hats. Like the one who is, I think about the example of like the neighborhood señora, right? Who was like the person who would take care of kids, would take care of, the elders, would also make like batch meals. She would do everything.
Yes.
And that is where we are now as a generation, right? You think about the people who have their full-time job.
Yeah.
DJ on the side.
That's right.
Are launching a podcast, or
True.
Just doing all these things because of several reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to your point, it's not just being in one lane. It's really the person who is probably working a corporate career, who also has a side hustle doing entrepreneurship, who is also probably exploring their creative passions, right? And so it's and what's really interesting is the whys behind this. So we're going to go through and explore a little bit about, why it is that people are sort of feeling, particularly Latinos, are feeling the need to go into this. One thing we didn't add was author. And so I bring that up because obviously you are, like I said, I think to me the perfect example of somebody who is a multi-hyphenate. And I think you can certainly take us through what's the need. I think for some people like you're a go-getter. So, I think you have a checklist of things that you want to get done and you wanted to make sure that you get those things crossed off. But one of the things that's really interesting is that for most of these folks, they're doing it out of necessity.
Well, to be honest, Carlos, that's how I started, right?
Okay.
So I was in corporate America forever. And when I was in corporate America, I'll tell you, when I was younger, my dad had a bar. And so I would work my full-time job at PepsiCo and then go bartend.
Okay.
Because, that was a family business and it's,
that's what you do.
You don't have a choice.
Right. That's what you do.
When I was leaving corporate, I did two things. I started a trucking company and I started Elevar. I knew I loved coaching. It was my favorite thing to do. I also knew I needed something that was going to provide that steady income while I built my client base.
Yes, absolutely.
So I started Priority Parcels and Elevar Development. Then I was like, oh my God, you know what? I'm doing all this coaching, but I want to give this coaching back to my community. Mm-hmm. And then Corporate Cafecito was born.
Yep.
And then I also have a drinks company called Drop Needle.
Yes.
Where I'm one of the 5 founders.
Okay, that's like, I think we're getting on 5. Yeah.
But you know what? In there have been a couple businesses that haven't gone well.
Yeah.
And then I actually, I closed, or as they say, I sunset my trucking company.
That's right.
Because my mom was getting sick. And then I was going to be the primary caregiver of my parents.
Yes, absolutely.
So I had to give that one up for the other.
And for those of you who haven't previously tuned into Corporate Cafecito, we actually explore quite a few of these different sort of phases and facets of your multi-hyphenate journey, if you will. And some of them, one of the ones that comes to mind is the one about the sandwich generation, where we talk about you needing to do that. Or, there's one around, one we did around transparency, which there was a moment of bliss for me. But there was one around, purposeful feedback and purposeful communication, where you talked about what that process was for you to sunset your trucking company and how you went about doing that.
Yeah,
and it's been so
hard.
interesting how each one of these things has, when I talk to you, you talk about fulfillment, but one of the things that we don't often talk about is the discomfort, which, by the way, we did talk about in one of the episodes.
Yeah,
so
it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, but part of it is also like it's sad when you have to close a business or when
Mm-hmm.
your business doesn't go how you thought it would go.
Sure.
Um, but I think that when you have like so many businesses, uno va a pegar.
Yeah.
So
It's
when
like
you
playing the lotto a little bit.
a little bit. So the multi hyphenate, I think about it's not unique to like I would love to say like I'm so unique in doing this, but I know so many people out there.
Yeah.
Like one of my girlfriends who lives down the street, she is a notary. She has her full time job doing like working for a major insurance company. She does rental properties,
Jeez.
and she just opened up an acai bowl shop.
Oh, I need to know what this place
Yeah.
is. I am addicted to acai bowls.
Oh, that's
Oh
funny.
my
I've never
gosh,
had
yes,
one.
I know. Oh, you should definitely have one.
But I think that it's also very much in our community. Like
Yeah,
I think about like my dad growing up, like he had a bunch of friends in mariachis, and they were like assembly lane workers during the day and just belting out the tunes at night.
yeah.
And so it was just, it's just I think how we're
It's
bred.
kind of second nature, but
Hmm.
I do think one of the things that's really interesting is there is a cultural kind of difference. We don't have the safety nets necessarily that I think other maybe groups of folks probably have had. I
We
mean, in
don't have
many cases,
generational
we don't have
wealth.
that generational
We don't
wealth.
start with a house. We start with an apartment.
Yeah, and so I think that in and of itself, it already puts particularly Latinos, but not just Latinos, but I think, one of the things that we talk about is, where we try to point out where there are similarities in other, for other
Yeah.
demographic groups. And I do think that generally people of color, underrepresented folks don't have that generational wealth, and they're just trying to build that upward mobility. So it's not like I can necessarily, in your case, thankfully you had your dad's bar that you could, work. You had that example.
I didn't want to work at the
Right,
bar.
that's true. But you had it.
So,
And
well, let's
yeah,
explore that because okay, part of it is out of necessity and part of it is not by choice, right? Think about my kids.
yeah,
When I had the trucking company on weekends, I was like, we got to wash fans.
that's right.
Christmas Day when we're closed, we're going to make sure every battery works, like so
I love that.
it's also because I always wanted to have like a lazy Saturday and didn't get that chance. I think a lot of us are forced into this mentality of like, I don't know if we would know what to do if we sat home.
That's true. That is a whole nother topic. I
Yeah.
think, because and we have kind of touched on that a little bit, right? The importance of taking care of yourself, and the burnout is real. One of the biggest things that,
Yeah.
the research shows around these multi-hyphenates is the fact that the burnout factor is high. And when you think about just corporate work,
Hmm.
I think it's like two-thirds of employees are on the verge, or if not already at burnout stage. And I'm sure you probably find this even
Oh
with some of
yeah.
the work that you're doing from a coaching perspective, but I can't even imagine. I can imagine it a little bit, but I certainly don't have all the check marks that you have. I've thought about writing a book, and then I even think like, where would I even find the time to write a book? Or I think about, and again, that's probably just more me, but the reality is I'm constantly making this trade-off between work-life balance and making sure that I'm not getting to a place of burnout. But that is one of the unfortunate, like, real side effects of people who
It
are having
is.
to go through this sort of multi-hyphenate stage.
And I would say I have experienced burnout, and I could pinpoint the times when it's been so bad it's been like paralyzing. And
Yes,
it's weird because during that time, I have one of my girlfriends who's a client of mine, and she goes, when you're fine, you're talking whatever. She's like, the minute you stop responding to texts
that's
or
when
phone
you,
calls, she's
yeah.
like, I know something's
I
up.
know
You know
something's
that
out.
too.
Yes, I was gonna say we definitely have been there, and it's true. And I mean, I think that is. Listen, I love when people are able to explore their, creative
Mhm.
sides and everything else. I think that's fantastic. But one of the realities is that we do. It's your point around not having a choice
Yeah.
is very valid, because when I talk to other folks who are multi-hyphenate, or even in my own experiences in trying to do more than one thing, that is a consistent message that we get. And, you know, part of it is, it's not like their workplaces have to or should necessarily acclimate to this. I mean, this is people wanting to do these things on their own.
Right. Right.
But again, they do come with a little bit of a price, and you've been, I think, very open and honest about what those things have been for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, even like my time away from my family, or my time away from you know, just myself, and having to put other people first,
Yeah.
and you know, battling with the things that, you know, are going on internally, but being like, I still have to show up. I am the product and the brand and the
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
so I don't have the luxury of not showing up.
Absolutely. Is there one hyphenate that has been more difficult for you?
Hmm. You know what? I would probably say the trucking company,
Okay.
because I had to learn OSHA, FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Association, the DOTs. I had to learn like how to change batteries on different fobs, how to like, you
I
know,
can
what's
barely
the
do it
best
on mine.
phone,
Yeah.
what's the best plan, what's the best. And so like that one was probably the most humbling, because it had nothing to do with my corporate experience other than having managed people
Okay.
and operations, right? But then it's like, what happens when you put unleaded in a diesel engine? Well, that is the worst thing that could possibly ever happen
Yeah.
in your life.
Yeah. Well,
That'll
and
cause
actually,
a $30,000 engine rebuild.
well, can we back up for a
Yeah.
second? Like, of all the things you could have done,
hmm
why specifically a trucking company?
So it was really interesting, because there was a link on CNN saying, you know, like, um, Amazon wants you to start a company and they're going to help you do it. And I applied. I told my husband, I'm like, I think I can do this. And it was a wonderful
That's
experience.
great.
And I did it for 5 years. And but I always thought like there were going to be so many safeguards in that process that would
Mm,
help me learn those things. Like I wouldn't be learning it on my own. There would be
sure.
some sort of like a corporate structure.
Yeah.
Um,
So it wasn't planned for you to necessarily go in that route. It
no.
was you seeing a link and then deciding, this is something
Yeah.
I think I can do.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you
Okay.
know what was what probably gave me that push was I had been my box on my org chart had been moved so many times
Okay.
that I was like, I'm gonna be let go. I'm gonna be, you know, severed. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
do the reduction in force.
Yeah.
And so I thought this was gonna be a good leap where I could do both of them at the same time, and, you know, see which one. And you know what? And they went like this, you know, when one would go up, one would go down, one
Oh,
would go
wow.
up. And so I do think there's a certain spirit needed in that multi hyphenate,
Yeah. Let's talk
right?
about that.
I think about the people who, you know, there was this lady doing Uber Eats, and she had her kid in the front seat.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, you know what? That's really cool. Like she probably needs extra money. She's
Mm-hmm.
probably working to help, you know, her kid have a
Her
better
kid.
life,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
buy something for her son. And I was like, and she could take him with, and she's probably talking to him the whole time.
Yeah.
And you know, I just thought that was really to me, I don't know, it touched me, because I was like, that's really cool. Like the kid's not at home, like he's with his mom. And I don't know, I just thought it was very sweet. um I think the multi hyphenate, like when you do it, you almost get addicted to it,
Really.
where you want to do more, where people will come to you with like different ideas. And I know there's people where I'm just like, you know what, you're really good at this. What if we tried this? And you know, it's very becomes a community, the multi
Okay.
hyphenates. And you know, one of my cousins, she's crazy. She is a t-shirt maker, a dog walker. She does everything, and she makes jewelry, and
She's the
yeah,
multi-hyphenate.
and
Okay.
she just got a corporate job. And I was like, "What are you gonna give up?"
Yeah.
And she was like, probably just the dog sitting, but not for every, like, she's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
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 She's like, there may be a couple times where I give in just because I like dogs.
So she kind of takes them as like stretch assignments,
Yeah.
essentially, or kind of like growth opportunities. Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think in the few spurts maybe that I've done of like multi hyphenation, I
Mm.
will say I think there is something there about capacity building that you learn about yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you make sure that you're taking care of everyone and everything else first. You know, in our case, we have families. You know, we have obviously you have other a million other things that you've got going on. You know, most people do,
Well,
but you have to, you're right. I mean, at first you're like, "Oh wow, I'm training for a 10K." Well, actually, I'm training for my first full
what?
triathlon. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that there are different training programs, and you can
Hmm.
go into a bunch of other stuff, and I'm considering some of those too. But in a triathlon, you've got three different courses. You've
Yeah.
got the swim, you've got the run, you've got
Bike.
the bike, right?
Yeah.
And you know, in a full triathlon, you've got these really long distances, and one of the things that I'm trying to do is to figure out what's the right way to build capacity for myself so that I'm practicing a little bit. This isn't the first time that I'm going out there, but I also realize I'm not interested in running multiple marathons in the process of training for, or I should say triathlons, not
Mhm.
marathons, but it does feel like a marathon
Yeah,
for
I'm
me.
sure.
But, you know, one of the things that I decided to do was I'm going to try the full swim distance, see how that goes. I'm going to try the full bike distance, see how that goes separately. I'm going to try the full run distance, see how that goes. And then I need to figure out how I build capacity to do all those three things at the same time. When I think about the multi hyphenate, I feel like a lot of what you're saying to me sounds a little bit like that, where you're constantly capacity building. And
So
that's the part that maybe becomes a little bit addicting.
it's really funny. I can't remember where I heard this quote or read this quote or but this quote is like so symbolic, I think, of the multi hyphenate, which is the best way to build capacity is by exhausting capacity, which means you
Mm,
have used up all of your capacity and now you've got to figure out where you're going to get more capacity from.
yeah.
And I was like, yes, right?
Well,
Like there
good.
you like
I feel
I
like I'm
will
doing that. That's
yeah.
great. Look at
See?
that.
But I thought that was really interesting because when you are doing these things, you will multitask, right?
Uh,
And I will go into this whole thing about how we cannot multitask, how you can only do one thing at a time because your brain cannot focus on multiple things. Um, but when you are doing that, you know, I'm like driving somewhere and I'm thinking of something, and you know, I send myself emails in the middle of the night when I wake up, and I'm like, I forgot
yes.
to do this, dun, 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 you know, and
Yes.
I'm just like, and so it just like I I operate 24 hours a day, and I don't know if that's the right thing, and it's probably not healthy, but it works for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, when you exhaust your capacity, that's when you learn
You're
how to
building a
build
little bit
capacity.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, that's what's been interesting for me, and particularly on the run element of it, because that's the very last thing. And I
Mhm.
just know I'm not a good runner, period. So, you know, but one of the things that in the training program that I am doing is that they try to help you teach your body how to better use
Mhm.
oxygen, how to more efficiently,
Yeah,
you know,
how to
do
build
these things, how to build
capacity.
capacity. And so you're right. I mean, there have been things that I've needed to do just to even manage my own ADHD. And I feel bad oftentimes for my husband who's having to manage my ADHD with me. But the reality is that I've realized if I don't send something immediately, and again, that's just part of, that could be part of multitasking, that could be part of, again, just building that
Mhm.
capacity, but I've learned to do things more efficiently, and I feel like I'm doing more things. Um, and I think the most important thing, and I would love to talk about this a little bit, is making sure that whatever you're doing it well.
Yeah.
Because I tend to find, and the research also shows that when people multi hyphenate, they can become a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Mhm.
And they could also maybe not even necessarily become a jack of all trades. they could be doing so many things and spreading themselves so thinly that they don't do anything necessarily well. And then they could end up in your coaching, in one of your
Yeah.
coaching programs. Not saying that it's just people that aren't doing well that are in coaching, but I've seen that a lot, Nayeli, where people sort of take on more and more and more and more, and they spread themselves too thinly, and then there's just not enough peanut butter,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
you're 100% right. One of the things is you have to be clear about what you do. And so, for example, Corporate Cafecito was born from Elevar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what I do in coaching, I do here. So, that requires zero extra skill set.
Mm-hmm.
With when I authored the book, Pencils Down, it was also based on my experiences of this, of coaching, of working with teachers and administrators who wanted to exit the school system. So that was related,
Sure.
right? So these were still part of
They
my
were
core skill set.
extensions. They
Yeah.
were natural extensions of what you
Right.
were doing. Yeah.
So drop needle is an extension because it brings me back to my alcohol roots with my drink and knowing sales and knowing my distributors. So it's still flexing a muscle, but it's a muscle I already had.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I said that the trucking was so
I
hard
was
because
just about to
it was
say
a new
that.
muscle that I had to
Yeah.
build.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, if I decided today, like, I'm going to go open up a taqueria, like, yeah, I can make really good guisados, but I would have to learn all the other stuff of like how to handle food and like all the food safety things
Yeah,
and taxes for, food and
absolutely.
excise tax and blah, blah. And so it would push me to a place where I'm not comfortable, where I don't have the skill
It's
set.
just not a
Yeah.
natural. You're right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So you need to make sure that when you're doing the multi-hyphenate, you could do it two ways. One, build on your existing skill set so that your brand is still your brand and these are just brand extensions,
Love that.
right?
Yes.
Oh, or do something that is a skill set you want to develop or can develop and have time to develop. And then there's, to me, what I would say, more of like that just quick hustle of like, if I go do this, I'm going to make this much money, which, I would say like the Uber Eats and like the
Sure.
DoorDashes and all those of like, this meets a short term need to get this money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. One of the things that folks, and you talked about this, which I love, is your brand is so important as
So
you're doing
important.
these things. And so if you're the best damn painter, if you're the best damn painter and you decide that in addition to your corporate role, you want to go ahead and
Mhm.
take on painting, and yet you can't deliver paintings to your paying clients, or certainly in a timely manner, that's going to start to impact
Yeah,
your brand,
you're
right?
right.
And then, if you spend too much time on that and not enough time on your corporate gig, then that's going to impact, your brand in that aspect as well. And so there is this tug and pull between necessity and also making sure that we're doing things right.
A hundred
So that
percent.
we're
Yeah.
not we're not it's all for the benefit, right? It's what I call it's additive. It is compounding versus detracting or
Yeah.
or subtracting from anything that you're doing. So, any other pieces of advice that you have for multi hyphenates out
Um,
there?
we have that saying, zapatero tus zapatos.
Mm-hmm.
But zapateros also make purses and belts
Yes.
and wallets and really cool things. So I would say, if you are or you want to become one or are on your way to become one, start with things that
Yeah.
and that's going to push your skill set, and then go for the unknown.
Love that.
We are in excuse me, we are in this world where we can reinvent ourselves
True.
a million times.
Absolutely.
So just because you stick with my zapatero, just because you're a zapatero doesn't mean you can't be anything else.
That's
And
true.
you can be whatever you want. And and even like I love seeing people like, well, I think Vicente Fernandez was discovered when he was in his 50s or something. Like, it's never too late. The guy who started Kentucky Fried Chicken, wasn't it like in his 60s or 70s? Like,
I don't know the
so
story now. Now
I
I'm
I
curious.
know. I'm like, I don't know the exact, but I know the
Yeah, you're
gist.
like,
I'm a get you closer kind of
Yeah.
girl. But don't feel limited. And if you're somewhere now and you want to like venture into the multi-hyphenate and start something and maybe a good platform to jump to springboard to your next job
Yeah.
or your next career and you're building experience, like I would say don't seem disheveled. Do whatever you do it with full intention and
Yes.
doing it to a level that you're comfortable with.
Yes.
But I am, I embrace the multi hyphenate.
I
So
and I love it. I would say the thing for me is I'm a big believer in the pilot method. And
mhm,
so, it's a little bit of the fast failing kind
mhm.
of, so try something. If it doesn't work, try it a different way. If that doesn't work, try it a different way. And then maybe at some point you probably have to reconsider.
Yeah.
But there's that sort of fail fast model
Yes.
where you go through and you give things a go. I mean, because I think on the opposite end of that, there are a lot of Latinos that I know that are multifaceted, that are multi-talented,
Mhm.
and they're afraid to take that leap.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't mean that it has to be something that requires a ton of investment on the front end, and
Look
I
at
mean not necessarily just in financially, but even time, right?
think of all the tamales ladies
Yeah.
who are the best and who make these delicious tamales, and they go out and they sell what they have, and then boom, next day they decide, and I have the one I go to the most. She's only on Saturdays, but she'll do special orders. So she knows her capacity. She
Yeah.
has a regular job and she also takes care of kids. So,
Yeah.
that to what you're saying is like venture out when you
Venture
can.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
venture out, try it out, and know when to recognize, if something isn't necessarily sort of heading in the direction that you're wanting
Mhm.
to go to. It's a tough balance because it takes time to build
Yes.
some of these things up. So, you have to decide. And I would say, whatever it is, if you do have a family or other loved ones, always make sure that you're staying connected and staying engaged with them, because they will root for you, but they will
And
also
they'll probably be
give
your
you the
staff.
real. Yeah, they'll also give you the real.
Yeah. No, you're
If it's starting
100%.
to feel like maybe this is taking up a little bit more than it should, or it's preventing your capacity, or
Mhm.
from fulfilling other obligations. You need that feedback.
You
We
do need
need
that
that
feedback.
feedback from
Yeah.
those folks. And I'm sure you've probably had many conversations with your
Oh,
husband and your
yes.
kids around all stages of where you've been and what you've done.
Yeah, 100% we
Cool.
have.
Well, listen, we're rooting for all the
Yeah.
multi-hyphenates. We want you to continue to do as much as you can, as long as you feel that it's exactly
Yes.
where you should be and what you should be doing. But just remember, obviously, some of the tips and tricks that we
Yeah,
shared, because we want to make sure, again, we're rooting for you and we want you to do well.
100%. So, cheers to all the multi hyphenates. I didn't even know that word until
There you
Carlos told
go.
me. I go, "What's a multi hyphenate?" He's like, "You."
You,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, keep going, dream big, because we can do whatever we want.
I love that. Well, thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Corporate Cafecito. I'm Carlos Butler Vale.
Y yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas. Bye.
Bye.